Hello and welcome back to the Argyle Digital Marketing Leadership Forum. My name is Vicki Lynn Brunskill with Argyle. It's great to have everyone joining us today. First, just a quick reminder to stop by our sponsor's virtual booth at any time during today's event and for the following week. Our partner is committed to providing you with valuable content and a great overall experience today. And at any time during the event, you can visit their virtual booth from the main agenda page. Also, through today's event, you have the opportunity to win one of several prizes. So please do check out the prizes and raffle rules tab of the interface to see how you can earn points. And to ask questions throughout the session, simply type into the Q&A chat and we will address your questions at the end of the session. And now, without further delay, we're excited to have our panelists with us for a discussion titled Customer Experience, Enhancing Customer Journeys Through Digital Experience. To start out today, I would like to, we'd love to learn a little bit more about our panelists, and I'm going to begin with Christina. And Christina, I asked, please introduce yourself and tell us the most significant ways that you've seen organizations improve the customer experience through digital innovation.
Awesome. Thanks, Vicki Lynn. So my name is Christina Baker. I am the digital strategy lead at Silvertech. Silvertech is a full service digital agency. And the strategy team really advises on a lot of customer experiences issues that our clients face. We have clients that range from government, utilities, banks, higher ed, healthcare. So really organizations that are impacted by some significant customer experience challenges. And really what I see from where I sit and where we can make the most impact is around the management of data and breaking down data silos. Some of the biggest challenges to having that ideal customer experience or that best-in-class experience really resides in how do we manage data and those interactions that our customers take with us in order to reduce areas of friction. So for instance, if we have someone submitting a question or an inquiry or calling a help desk and they aren't getting the answer they need, how are we reaching back out to them? How are we keeping track of this? And then how are we continuing to market to them in a way that is really relevant to them and is going to make their experience with us one that resonates and that really can improve customer satisfaction?
Perfect. Thank you, Christina. We're so glad you're here. Thanks for being with us. Next, I'd love to pose the same question to Jill. Jill, please give us a brief introduction and then share your thoughts on digital innovation in the CX space.
Hi, yes, I'm Jill Delaney. I'm our Global Marketing Technology Director at Profitability. We are a global mobility transportation manufacturing company, and I lead all of our digital marketing experience and customer experience for our brands. And as Christina mentioned, one of the biggest challenges is simply just breaking down organizational silos. We have a lot of data in a lot of different places from different teams that customers are giving us, and our customer expectations have changed with the age of digital communications and social media and increasing expectations around customer service and experience. Our speed and agility of implementation are a challenge, and they have to adjust to meet those customer needs. On top of that, effectively leveraging and integrating technology and data together to a centralized place so all of the different departments and organizations can access and see all of that information about a customer in one place. On top of identifying and prioritizing the data and the customer experiences as one of our top needs amongst our employees and making sure they have the right tools and training. One of the other focal points for us with third-party cookies going away naturally on top of everyone's mind is data privacy, complying with regulations, making sure we have a first-party data strategy, that we have data governance and cleansing processes, that we're really securing the data that we have about customers and making sure we meet their expectations to deliver that personalized experience.
Thank you, Jill. Yeah, we're hearing lots about data privacy in this space, and we're happy you're here. Thank you for being with us today. And last but certainly not least, Phil, please introduce yourself and tell us what you've seen in terms of digital innovation in the CX space.
Yeah, awesome. So I'm Phil Burrows, Senior Director over at Verizon, and I lead all of our digital marketing, e-commerce, and customer experience for our consumer group. So anything you do as far as app, online, purchase journeys, all the way from the very top of the marketing funnel, all the way through checkout for our mobility services and plans and products, my team leads. So, a lot of really good comments from Christina and Jill just on like digital innovation in itself. One of the things that I've seen and something we're really hyper focused on is there's so much data that we do have access to now and can leverage to really improve our customer experience. When you think about like in the telecom space, networks have all improved. And so the big differentiator we have right now is how do we make that experience for the customer seamless and drive value for them. So when I think about data and leveraging that real time to kind of continuously optimize and improve our experiences, one of the challenges that I think we've seen is how do we operationally support that? Meaning, I think sometimes we're getting data so fast and insights so quick now that we can't turn around and have actions on that as immediate. So we'll talk a little bit more about technology and those pieces of it, but I think that's the biggest challenge and opportunity for us right now is how do we use that data that we're getting real time to make real time decisions for the customer.
Thank you, Phil. So thank you all for being here. And I'm going to go next to Jill. Jill first, actually, on this question, but I want to make sure this is a conversation so that everybody has time to weigh in on these questions as well. Jill, I'm going to ask, what do you think are the top challenges related to applying data to create more customer-centric digital experiences?
Yeah, thank you. I think it touching on these a little bit more than what we mentioned at the beginning, as Christina says, silo data, data privacy, governance of data, who has access to the data, your first party data strategy. I think really coming back to meet the customer where they are and making sure that we're trying to deliver the personalized solutions, but it isn't a one size fits all approach. And so sometimes from an organizational standpoint, when we talk about customer experience, it may be something different for each different user persona or each different brand or product line that we're delivering an experience on and interactions that they may have. And so making sure that we're thinking about that in different ways and addressing kind of some of those concerns. As Phil said, probably one of our largest concerns is just our speed and agility and making sure we have the right resources. There's a lot of data in a lot of different places and there's a high customer expectation. So how do we support that? How do we leverage that? At what pace can we move to leverage that in the best way? And kind of the last thing that we want to do is put ourselves in a privacy position where we're not using it properly, or we're not following proper processes, or we're not giving the customer the best experience, and making sure that we think through that holistically with all of our data processes and our strategies.
I think that's a lot of great thoughts, Jill. And I would add to that, from where I sit, working with a number of different clients, one of their main struggles is really just, what is the story this is telling me? How do I get the insight out of it? And that's where having a partner can really help too, because, we see a lot of different sets of data. We work with a lot of different clients, so we can help you kind of distill that down and understand what are we actually supposed to be learning here, and then how do we apply it?
Phil, did you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think it's the same challenges we run into, and just to kind of build on Christina's point, there's so many, especially at larger organizations, there's so many different types of data. So you might get one story from one place. And one of the things we're trying to do is really rationalize all the different data and inputs and insights that are coming into the business. So we're not, actively using it to, make a point against each other, but really unearth like, what is the problem we are trying to solve? How do we get as clean of data as we can that's consistent across the board? To really make an impact. Because I think some of the times as you get more access to things, there's definitely different ways to slice it and cut the story. And that doesn't behoove any of us to kind of go down that path. It's really about how do we get it all together and leverage it for to improve the overall experience or what we're trying to solve for.
Now, I'm not going to put anybody on the spot, but I'd love to hear. We just talked about the challenges. So are there any solutions? Anybody want to step up and say, hey, this is how we fixed how we're addressing that challenge before we move on to the next question?
From my perspective, I think, what are the solutions to these challenges? I think having really good relationships with IT is probably your best bet. I think that's where, sometimes marketing and IT can kind of butt heads and we're not sure whose purview is what. And I would just say working really collaboratively with your IT department, being very open and transparent and breaking down any of those communication barriers can be your first step, because that can really get you, better access to the data sets, better access to the tools, and they can be a really, great asset in here's what we're trying to achieve. Can you please help me achieve it? And I where I see clients who are the most successful, those are the ones that are the most successful, where they work very collaboratively.
I echo and agree with that. I think we have a data governance committee or team that is cross-functional that comes together to really focus on that and have a data center of excellence globally that's really looking at it holistically with all of our brands and teams. But Christina is right. The relationship that gets built and really trying to effectively start knocking down those organizational silos and just having visibility to what data lives where and how you can start doing it. The other thing I would add is it can seem overwhelming and maybe just starting small. And you don't have to boil the ocean or personalize everything, but start with a pilot, and we're going to use this data set and we're going to personalize this customer experience or this persona on this product line or something like that, and then build from there. But don't let it get too overwhelming.
I agree with both points there. I think, from our standpoint, we're attached at the hip with IT and our designers. Like that is our crew that we live and die by, and they're super important and willing to engage there because they have access to a lot of different cuts and different types of data, just on customer behavior, lean into. And I think to Jill's point, like starting small is important. I think we've done some stuff over the years. I wouldn't call it a solution, but kind of an evolution of some of the things we've done. Is standing up smaller siloed, I'll call them pods, right, to go after specific pain points. So for example, we'll go after hyper personalization. We're not going to scale that across the business yet. We're going to do it in a pod, test it out, not just test what's working for the customer and the technology, but test the operating model. How does this fit into the broader picture? So, it's important to do that to maintain quality for your customers as well.
Thank you so much. Yep, Phil, I'm going to stick with you for a minute, and I'm going to ask this question. What are some recent strategies and technology gaps that you think CX and marketing leaders are facing? So in terms of building powerful customer experiences, and again, how can these be overcome?
Yeah, I think it's an ongoing journey. I've been through a bunch of different, I'll call them like transformations internally. And I think, and just talking to other people and it just direct experience here, from a strategic standpoint, I think the biggest challenge is really on the vision and the investment piece of it, right? I think you could say, hey, here's what we want to go do. Here's what we need. But when you think about some, especially larger organizations that aren't, digital first, digitally savvy, asking for those levels of, certain hundreds of millions of dollars in investment is a challenge. And from a CX side, it's something we all know isn't super important. It's becoming even more important year after year after year. It's still a challenge to measure, a tangible impact. It's not like a sale, right? It's, a longer horizon on that. So I think that the most challenging part is just setting up that strategy and what are the clear outcomes that you want to get out of this from the very beginning to kind of set that landscape and have the right level of executive sponsorship to go after it. I think the other thing that gets in the way, and then I'll hit on the technology piece, is really just business complexity, right? Like a lot of the times I think CX is looked at to solve a lot of business pain points and obviously improve the experience. But if you don't look at the whole picture on your business policies, just different processes, how you're going to market, you're kind of masking a larger issue. So you have to think about, when you're thinking about these strategies, you need to think much broader than just like, what is the customer seeing on site or the experience with a rep in store, but how are we actually delivering? How are we getting to the customer? Which kind of parlays into the third part, just around technology itself. I don't think there's gaps in technology. I think we've got tons of technology. I think the challenge is how you orchestrate all that technology, right? We have a lot of like homegrown internal solutions. We have a lot of vendor solutions that are plugged in. And a lot of our challenge is, okay, how can we move faster? And a lot of the time it's just untangling those different pieces and saying, how do these work together without completely kind of blowing it up? So I wouldn't say there's a lack of technology right now or a gap in it. I think it's really about like, how do you leverage it effectively is the biggest challenge in front of us.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think too, like there may even be like too much technology, like everybody is some kind of MarTech nowadays. And it's like, everybody kind of does a little bit of something, but nobody does all the things. And then you end up with this like Franken MarTech stack where you're like, piecing everything together. And a lot of times, you can end up sort of over investing and not really getting the mileage out of everything. Something I'm really passionate about is helping clients get the mileage out of what their investment already is and making use of that. And seeing, like for instance, I have some clients who do no marketing automation at all, and they want to get started and they think like, well, we got to go spend, $3 million on Salesforce. And it's like, no, you don't. You can use what you've got and sort of test those things and start to get some proof of concept to make that argument, so that when you go to leadership and you want to invest in a more powerful tool, you have a great reason and a great case study to say how it drives revenue.
Yeah, Phil and Christina is spot on. My team will often say we've over-teched. There's so much technology that we have to, the hard part, as Phil said, is integrating it together. And we really look at our utilization reports. But as Phil said, how are we all tying this back to the customer experience and keeping the customer at the forefront? There isn't any probably brand or organization that doesn't have the customer as part of their values. But it's really kind of how you walk that walk versus just talking about it and what you're measuring. And I think Phil said that well, of it's a goal for every department, not just marketing, but really having a customer-centric goal and being able to measure it. And, what is our NPS score? How are we all aligning together? How are we leveraging this data to improve the customer experience? What are our personalization strategies? It's just not marketing technology, but to Christina's point of we have to leverage fully what we have in our stack and make sure that it is aligned to improving that customer experience and that it's something measurable and that we have the right resources in place. As Phil said, it can be easy sometimes to get the technology, but to get the people on board and all the departments and the resources like you, Christina, to support where we're going with data and customer experience is also key.
Thank you. We're going to stick with the technology aspect of things for a minute. I'm going to go to Christina on this question first. How has AI changed the customer experience landscape? What are the outcomes of this?
Yeah, I think, it's such a relevant topic right now. And it's something that, I'm like, I have sort of a love-hate relationship with right at the moment because it is still very new, and we're all still kind of, anybody tells you they're an expert in AI is not telling you the truth. It's still very new. We're all still trying to figure out how we can use it responsibly. And I think that's where we need to exercise a little bit of caution. But where I have seen great success with it is in things like personalization, custom messaging. Those are really great, uses for AI. Things like predictive analytics. We've seen a lot of success with predictive analytics and understanding customer behavior, being able to cross-sell more effectively. That's where we see a lot of great use of it. And then honestly, I think, when we look at where AI is kind of heading, I think that's we tend to sort of see it on this sort of macro level of, the robots are going to take all of our jobs and they're going to do all these things. And it's, maybe we'll get there. We don't really know. But I would say for anyone who's sort of looking to dip your toe into AI and sort of think about how can I use this more, think about it. I often recommend that we think about it in terms of things like SEO. That's a great introductory use for AI when you're looking at your digital experience. How can we use AI to help, support some of our content, some of our copywriting and metadata? That's a great, sort of introductory place. But I think where we see it really heading in the future is it's going to become more about, really delivering on those customized experiences. So we have our personalization, we have our predictive analytics, and then even things like virtual assistants. I see great use with virtual assistants and really shortening that time to sale. I think those are going to be the most impactful ways we see AI come into play.
Phil, I see you shaking your head. Anything to add?
Yeah, no, I agree. I love Christina's point around like there's no expert in AI. I think there's a lot of demystification just around like what is actually being used versus what's not versus what will come. I think also Christina like hit it right on the head. There are some like very, very tangible use cases right now, like such as, from a generative perspective, like you're not having a creative team go create 50 different versions of a piece of creative. You can, have AI generate that, and then you can also put it in rotation, in a test rotation, right? Like there's that piece of it. There's messaging pieces of it. There's all sorts of elements, both on the CX side, but also the UX side, right? To help, whether it be user story writing or just all the different components that come with, running a digital business to make you more efficient and kind of augment where we're not as fast. But it's an interesting, like, we're using it in pockets, to your point around like personalization, recommendations, right? Like taking the bias out of it and saying like, hey, a customer might like this. Well, let's learn and see. So there's a lot of tangible use cases to go after it. I think we're just scratching the surface on it, but I don't think it's something that needs to be ultimately rushed, right? Like we've got to follow, what are we trying to solve for? Not just putting complexity and, AI in front of the customer just to put it in front of the customer. There's got to be a real use case there. And I think that's the important thing that people need to keep a lens on.
Yeah, I completely echo that, Phil. I know that's one thing that we're stressing in our organization is just kind of everybody coming up with the right use case for AI and really starting to utilize where and how we can best use it. As you said, creating more efficiency internally. I heard it said well recently, AI is the head, but we still need a human for the heart. And I thought that was a really well said part of AI. As Christina said, there's no expert right now, and everybody's trying to figure out how to make it most efficient for your organization to be more effective with your internal teams. As you said, Phil, we're not going and creating content from scratch, and we have research and imagery can be created at scale, and really the scalability and efficiencies that come with AI, I think, are tremendous. And Christina, the assistant, I think, is a good example, but there's still a human need behind the fact to make sure that we're leveraging AI in the right ways, and that the customer experience is still personalized, and it still feels human, because that's what they're looking for.
Thank you. Thank all three of you for that. That was excellent. So I want to stick with you, Jill. Can you share, we have about 10 minutes till we go to Q&A, give or take a few minutes. So we have a couple more topics that we wanted to cover. Can you share any examples of innovation when applying data-driven insights to craft those customized digital experiences?
Yeah, and I know we're all consumers. I know in our business we have an automotive arm, and so when we think about like all of the data that we have on a vehicle and automating alerts for service, and things that may be going wrong, or where you may need to bring your vehicle in, which is a tremendous use case for us for leveraging that data to make a better customer experience and really kind of get ahead of that. So that's one innovation for us personally. I know probably in everyone's personal lives, I always think of like Netflix. It's always recommending, personalized shows and recommendations. While they may be my husband's and not mine because we share an account, it definitely is kind of leaning and gleaning on all of that data, or the Amazon experience, definitely something that we're doing, which is, location-based demographics, buying behavior, bringing all these things into the experience, to make it more personalized and meaningful, and to really prove that we know the customer and what they may be wanting, or predicting what they maybe want to do next. As Christina said, we leverage a lot of technology in our email and SMS communications for how we talk to customers, and try to leverage that data that we know about them and bring that into that conversation to make sure we're delivering that tailored experience on where they want to receive it, when they want to receive it, and what they want us to talk to them about. So those are a few examples that come to mind. I'm sure Christina and Phil have a few others.
Yeah, I mean, I could jump in. From that perspective, we're I think something that Christina and Jill, you both hit on the beginning, like you've got to start small and maintain quality and but have scalability in mind, right? And I think that's the key for us. One of the things we had stood up a few years ago was what we called like real-time marketing. So very, an agile pod structure, really based on, hey, what are the insights we're seeing? What are the behaviors we're seeing? Let's go test, multivariate A/B test, like just, and now starting to integrate AI and some of the machine learning into that process. But really saying, hey, if we start to hyper personalize and we start to use this data, is it more effective? Is it driving incrementality? Is it doing what we expect it to do? And are the outcomes better? With that in mind of scaling a more broad operating model like that, because you can't just stand something like that up and, expect everyone to dive in and adopt it. So I think we've been leveraging data in that way, and just other parts of our funnels, right? Just, hey, we know things about customers, purchasing behavior. How do you remove friction? How do you take out pain points? Like just kind of the basics there. But it's all scalable. I think that's the key there, because a lot of times what I'll see organizations do is they they take all this data and they try and boil the ocean, and then you're only able to use it for one use case and you're back to the drawing board, which isn't, effective. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Jill and Phil, you guys really covered it well. I think it's really just about, not getting overwhelmed, starting small, and really looking to scale what works. I think that, we think about it in terms of, we'll start small because it's easier to take a smaller bite, but then we really have to follow through with that. And where I see folks sometimes get a little bit astray is that they will implement something, but then not optimize it, not tweak it, not look back at it. How is this working? What can we change? And then take those small incremental changes. We can't do all the changes at once or we'll never know what was effective. So we really have to think about it in terms of measurement as well. And that's where I think some people can get a little bit lost, is like, we want to be continually optimizing. We want to be measuring, because ultimately we want to take what works and then scale that larger.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And then here's the $1 million question. I'm going to start with Phil. What's next in CX?
Oh boy. Well, if we all had the answer to that, man, we'd be cooking. But no. So a couple of things. I was actually noodling on this question because it's an interesting one. It's ever changing, right? But I think a lot of the topics that we talked about today. First one just being AI and machine learning. Like, we're doing that in pockets of the business and different use cases. For us on the retail side, we're leveraging it to make our reps more engaged, smarter with their conversations that they're having with our customers. We're using it to improve our flows, but they're in pockets, they're in use cases, right? So how do you, going back to the question around integrating technology, how do you make that a part of your standard operating procedure? I think is going to be the biggest challenge and opportunity, and what's next in CX. I think for those that get there, that's going to really land into how we continue to iterate, evolve, and optimize. Like Christina was talking about, a lot of times we'll use data, we'll make a decision, we say, yay, this was awesome, it improved the customer experience, and we move on to the next thing, right? How do you leverage that as I'll call it like always on optimization with the data and feeding the machine, and looking at it, customers might have a preference or behavior today that's rapidly changing, right? And that could change tomorrow. So how are you constantly testing and retesting is going to be another one. And then I think that the third one, which is more of a business challenge, but at least from our perspective, a lot of our energy is spent on acquiring customers, right? Mm-hmm. Getting new customers, personalizing to get new customers, bring them in the door. There's not a ton of investment in general from what I've seen, just in the customer lifecycle management. The same kind of tactics around like personalizing offers to retain them, loyalty, but we're not really, when I look at different organizations, like that is an area where it's like, well, why invest if they're already a customer, right? That's where I think a lot of this technology can come into play to say, how are you making the customer feel great about their journey and their life with us as a brand, and really surprise and delight them along the way, because they are a customer of ours. We have more data on them, first party data, than we do on prospects. So how do you leverage that to your advantage? That's been, I think, an opportunity in general in the industry.
Yeah, I think just to jump on that, Phil, I think that's such a good point. And from where I sit, I think that, in terms of what's next for CX, I always come back to proactivity. Anything that, is causing us to reach out to the customer with a need that they don't know they need, a product they didn't know they wanted. To Jill's point earlier, we look at recommendation engines, things like, Netflix and Spotify and Amazon, and these are all, great examples of organizations that are doing it well. But how can we apply that to our individual organizations? What does that look like in practice? How does it look to be more proactive and, really help make it easier for the customer to do business with us? To Phil's point, how can we use it in that sort of account-based marketing type approach to really drive into that customer loyalty, build more loyalty and satisfaction, and continue to grow revenue in that way?
Yeah, I really like what Phil said about the loyalty piece. I think that is an untapped area in our market as well. We're certainly behind the retail organizations where you really feel like a loyal customer. And there's a focus on retention and really looking at a customer lifetime value versus just getting a new customer in the door and kind of focusing all the marketing efforts there, the customer experience on that end versus like looking at the entire experience from a customer and really putting yourselves in their position to look at all those touch points, and those touch points change daily. And so, what we were doing a year ago, we may be interacting with customers in new ways now, or there may be a new point of sale or purchase, or a new digital method in which they're engaging with us, or in-person method or location, and making sure that we're ready and able to shift when those things are evolving, and that we have the right technology, people, resources in place to do that.
Thank you. All excellent answers. Looking at the future. Thank you, Christina, Phil, and Jill. This has been a really practical and information-packed panel discussion, and I do see that we are starting to get some questions in from the audience. Audience members, you can still enter questions, and we're going to review some of the questions that came in now. The first question that came in is, how do you think AI will effectively help with the real-time processing and use of data? Anyone?
I'll jump in there. I think, where I see AI being of use in real-time processing, I would say is probably likely in something like lead scoring. Being able to predict what actions qualify someone as a more hot lead, more likely to convert, that then we can push to our sales team in real time to allow them access to reach out and nurture those leads and or close those deals in real time. That is where I see the most practical application of that use of AI, and whether that means, feeding information to a CRM in a way that has a structured strategy behind it to give cues to salespeople when they would want to reach out, or whether that means, providing stronger calls to action, more consistent calls to action, or better content along the journey to try to nurture a lead in real time.
Yeah, I would add on to that. I think that's a good example. I think in real time, our agents or salespeople or inside sales team that are required to be experts on a lot of things and have a lot of information at their fingertips. I think AI is a good resource for helping them kind of auto-generate things, and also get to the right materials, resources to provide those customers that they may be on the call with or in person with or messaging with at that time in a more effective way.
Yeah, just to pile on that, Jill, like perfect example of this, that when we're doing initial use cases, like a rep on the phone that's doing technical support, right? Instead of going through 200 pages of a router guide on how to fix the problem, you can ask AI to scan the document. In 3 seconds, you get exactly what you need. Like that's where there's a ton of leverage on the employee side of things as well.
Yeah, exactly. I think I see that a lot in our organization, even within my team. We're managing a website that has 15,000 web pages, and they're trying to quickly to find and update something, and that's where AI is coming in handy to be able to kind of track down and locate and make things more efficient.
Thank you so much. The next question that came in is asks, can you please tell us about the main differences between building a B2B customer experience and a B2C one, and any essential, I guess, that you recommend in a business-to-business environment? Any thoughts on that?
I can start. We service both B2C and B2B, and naturally keeping our dealer base heavily engaged and making sure they have the right tools and customer experience, but their customer experience looks very different than our consumer experience. And honestly, talking about data and customer experience, it's probably one of the biggest challenges that we have, is connecting our B2B data with our manufacturer data and making sure that we are giving a connected experience from the manufacturer side, from when a lead is handed off to a dealer to what they have at a dealership experience, to then when they become a lifelong consumer of our brand. And that is a challenge. I don't know that I have all the answers for like the right tools for the B2B environment, but it is important to make sure that you're thinking about connecting that experience and working with that B2B base, and kind of how you measure the two differently and how you connect them together.
Yeah, I'll just jump in there. I think, for me, I work with a number of financial institutions who have strong bases with individual customers, but then also have strong bases with business customers and commercial organizations. And what I see as sort of the divergent paths there is, when it comes to the individual customer, it's really just about the different needs and how do we serve the different user groups. For the individual customer, you may be looking at tools, more along the lines of email marketing, more almost like, I don't want to say cold, but I guess I would say like more sort of technology focused, less relationship necessarily. Even though we still have a lot of, face-to-face relationship, something like a business banking client is going to call their individual banker. They're going to have a stronger relationship with them. So where I see the divergent path there is that, sort of for the overall user base and that B2C user base, things like, marketing automation, email tools, those are more key. And then where I see on like a more of a relationship, I don't want to say higher level, but I guess like a larger kind of deal basis, things like CRM, and then, thinking too along content as well, what types of content are those people interested in and how are we delivering it? Where, an individual banking client might watch a TikTok, I don't expect the president of a food organization to watch a TikTok. So how do we kind of bridge those gaps and how do we deliver that content in a way that makes sense?
Thank you. Thank you so much. We have another question. We have quite a few questions coming in. This one question is, Phil mentioned that it's difficult to measure CX by traditional metrics, sales, and so on. What measurements are people using other than waiting 6 months and seeing if their NPS has gone up or customer service calls have gone down?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's multifaceted, right? So you've got to, like, for us, right? Like, we have a dual focus, right? It's improving the customer experience, removing friction, removing anything that's unnecessary. But I've also got a P&L where I got to drive sales. So sometimes they're at direct conflict with each other. I think, you've got to look at what's your main KPI you're trying to hit, and then what are the sub KPIs that are supporting it. So NPS is something obviously we look at, but to your point, it's a lagging indicator. There's other ways we can look at it. For us, we have things called like DIS, which is our digital interaction score. So how are customers feeling about the flows? How are they feeling about the experience? Like direct feedback that goes into our one of our digital health teams that then funnels to us to say, hey, we're seeing a trend where we're seeing a lot of comments about this specific step. We use tools like Glassbox to then lean into that and really look at the friction points. So there are indicators that I would say to drill in deeper, right? So for another example there is, hey, if we're not seeing conversion and we're seeing more fallout, where's the fallout coming from? How do we look at funnel analysis, progression rates? And you get into that and you can see qualitative and quantitative data coming back from our market research teams, like I said, our health team that are looking every single day at the flow and really drilling into that. So there's no like silver bullet to say here's how our customer experience is improving, but I can tell you this: if you're taking friction out of the flow and you're seeing more people progress and you're seeing less comments or feedback or direct errors or bugs coming into the site, that's a leading indicator for us.
Thank you. And the next question is, now this one's a little specific, and if you don't feel comfortable sharing the answer, that's okay. We'll take it offline. It says, Phil, what generative AI are you using to get multiple versions of concepts? From a UX perspective, I found nothing that iterates like that, and we still have to do everything by hand.
Yeah, so I would say in our we have a whole MarTech organization that's really focused on looking at new tools and processes. I mean, we've got some big, larger enterprise level relationships that we're working with that, can't go into specifics there, that are rolling out new tools. We leverage Adobe for a lot of things, Cognizant, a lot of different platforms that we're using now that we are just dipping into. But again, we're using them more in very, very specific use cases. So for example, if we're doing things on the CRM side, how do we use that for our email campaigns? How do we use that for some of our MLPs or marketing landing pages, for example? So I don't think there's like one foolproof solution out there yet. But the point of that team is to really test, like, what are these platforms doing? What are these vendors doing? Like, is there value added here? Or is this something we need to build? So I don't think there's one set one, but we're triangling a bunch of different ones right now.
Thank you. This question is, in what ways have you seen, we have time, by the way, for a couple more. In what ways have you seen companies ensure privacy and security while utilizing customer data to improve digital experiences?
Yeah, I can jump in on that one. Something I always recommend is certainly consult with general counsel on what particular laws you are subject to make sure you have very clear understanding of where you will try to remain in compliance. Again, collaboration really is key here. In terms of, where do I see the successful companies lie? I think it's around correct implementation of technology, things like cookie management, a system like OneTrust, or using, the cookie management within your CMS. This is such a relevant topic that so many systems like CMSs, content management systems, CRMs, like they have a lot of this already built in because they know how important it is to protect this data. And then I would say, really tight governance is a big part of it as well. Knowing who has access to these systems and making sure there's clear redundancy and roles and workflows. So, if I go to make a change or I need to access a certain data, what do I see and what do I not need to see, and be pretty conservative with that. If I'm only, for instance, I'm just a writer and I want to upload something to the website, I don't need to be able to see all the contacts that came in through a form on the website. So those types of things. Think about what your platforms offer you in terms of governance, and then have a really strongly documented plan for governance that you've worked with your general counsel, with your digital agency on, to make sure that everybody's aligned and there's redundancy. So if someone leaves the organization, you know who to go to. I can't tell you how many times someone has called me and said everybody left and we have no passwords and can't get into analytics anymore. So I think it's just very key to have that sort of documentation of a plan, and then obviously consult with your counsel.
Thank you, Christina. So did anyone else want to weigh in on that? No, we're going to move on to the last question. We only have a few minutes, so this will be a quick one. It's a big question, though. How can we balance the use of automation and human touch points to create a personalized yet scalable customer experience?
From my perspective, I think, follow the journey, follow your customer's journey, and where is that natural drop-off point or handoff point to a person? Think about it from your own perspective. Where would you see that frustration? Where does it just not become enough? There are robots, and virtual assistants and all of that. We can really only do so much with. At some point, we do have to have a human interaction, and we shouldn't be stalling that. Like, yes, we know it's expensive to have a sales staff or a customer support team, but we are human beings and we want to interact with our customers. We want to build strong ties with them. We want that customer loyalty, and you're just not going to get that 100% in a virtual assistant. So I would say have a clear customer journey. What does that ideal journey look like? What is the ideal outcome? And then look for those natural points of handoff.
Just to add one quick point, I'd love that, because a lot of the time we use technology to scan these things, see what the problems are, see what the issues are, but at some point you're missing that context, that human context. And you'd be surprised, we got our team a month ago just in a room in looking at things from a customer lens, that it was wow, why the hell did we do this? Right. And there's reasons for that, right? We all get stuck in the day job sometimes, but really kind of taking that hat off and looking at the context behind why something is happening from a human lens, I think is critically important, and something we can't lose sight of, especially as we're scaling a lot of this new technology into our operations.
Thank you. Unfortunately, we're out of time. I wanted to thank you all for this insightful, practical panel discussion. It's fabulous. And I want to thank everyone for joining us today for this session, and let you know that this session, along with all of today's content, will be available on demand following the event. And as a reminder, please do check out the prizes and raffle rules section to see how you can earn points to win one of several prizes. And our next session will begin after the break at 1:25 p.m. Eastern, and that will be a keynote presentation titled AI for Marketers, Revolutionizing Content Data Accessibility. Thank you, Jill, Christina, and Phil again for this fabulous discussion. Everyone else, please click on the join button that will appear on your screen to be redirected to that next session, and we look forward to seeing you there. Have a wonderful afternoon.